All right, men, welcome back. We are in week 1 and we are talking about mindset. We're talking about beliefs. We're talking about perspective. And for the next 4 weeks, we're going to focus on this thing that we call the mind. I find it to be a very important topic, and for us to begin to master our mind and understand it and the different things like that. But Jesus said this. The first and foremost and most important thing, the thing that we should be thinking about and that it should be paramount inside of our lives, is that we should love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all of our mind, and with all of our strength. And so God doesn't want us, He wants the whole man. He wants us holistically. And that is just because we started on this journey of faith and recovery. That doesn't mean we check our minds at the door. And that is, our minds are highly engaged inside of this process, and feeding our mind according to His Word and listening to His voice is paramount. It's super, super important. So we're going to define kind of what the mind is real quick, but then we're going to jump into the importance of beginning to change and to transform our mind. Now, our mind, 3 things that you think about when you think about the mind is that thoughts. These take place inside of the mind. A lot of times we think thoughts, and that they kind of fly in, and that is that sometimes we don't intentionally think them. If we're letting our mind wander, some thoughts and different stuff can come up, and so it has definitely a tendency to wander. But then those thoughts are attached to our feelings, and that is the way we feel about a certain situation. It begins to touch our emotions, and then it begins to affect our desires, which is the third part of the mind, is the will. So the mind, will, and the emotions is what classifies this idea of the mind. So thoughts, understanding, imagination, disposition. I want to thoroughly show you here how certain belief systems, when we form an opinion, when we form a judgment, it goes into the feelings and it affects the will and the desire. So these things these 3 areas of our mind just kind of go in sync to one another based upon what we believe. And that is, once we begin to make an opinion about something, whether good or bad, we begin to have feelings according to that opinion. And these may not be based upon any fact or reality. They're just simple opinions. For example, if you were in a fight with a friend or your wife or something, a child, a teenage child, something like that goes on, and our thoughts begin to formulate judgments and opinions. And some of these opinions are just thoughts that can come in the form of, wow, they think I'm stupid, or this, that, and the other thing, and we form thoughts and opinions based upon some judgments that we make. That, of course, leads to feelings of what? Suffering and pain based upon our opinion. And that begins to affect the will and begin to affect our behavior. Now, this scenario plays out in so many ways. I think it's really important for us to begin to identify the process and how it works, so we can stop the false opinions, the false judgments dead in their tracks. And that way they don't begin to affect our emotions, they don't begin to affect how we feel, and they definitely don't begin to affect our behavior. We could stop them at the beginning stages. So whenever you think of an action or behavior, a lot of those things, they start first with a thought. Thoughts are seeds, and seeds are certain thoughts that we begin to entertain and we begin to feed, and we say, wow, that's a really good idea, or wow, that might be true. And what we do, we give attention to those thoughts, and then we begin to feed those thoughts, and that's what begins to grow and affect our feelings and our emotions, and that in turn manifests in behavior. Let me show you how this works. I begin to lust after another woman. Seeds begin to be planted inside of my heart and my mind. I begin to entertain these thoughts, and I begin to feed them, and I begin to water them. Okay? And what begins to happen is it begins to affect my emotions. It begins to produce strong feelings inside of me. And this in turn affects my desires, which affects my conduct and my behavior. And you see here how everything starts in germination form inside of our thoughts before it ever becomes behavior. So thoughts is understanding our imagination and our disposition. Now, it's important to understand in this is that we have a responsibility inside of our disposition. And that is that we could determine and choose our disposition at any given moment based upon the judgments and the opinions that we give to the situation, right? Let me explain it this way. Two men can experience the exact same scenario, and one have a mindset of identity of an overcomer, and it can turn out to be a great and awesome thing for them. It can actually, the suffering and the pain can catapult them into the plan and the purpose of God. And that is based upon their opinion and perspective of the situation. Now, the other person experienced the same exact difficulties can allow his opinion to drive him to the ground into the pit of despair and self-pity and begin to cry, "Oh me," right? But the reality is that the same situations happen to the same men. The only difference is the perspective and the significance that we attach to the situation. So we can choose our disposition. And that is through training our mind and through understanding our own personal judgments and biases. We can begin to attack those and say, you know what, these opinions are not based upon reality. Let me give you another analogy so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. That my mother, I was taken away from my mother at a very young age. CPS came in and took all of us kids away, and we got scattered to multiple different relatives, 4 different relatives. All of us kids got scattered. And I had all this hate and animosity in my heart towards my mother that she couldn't keep us because she didn't love us. And all of these little small brain opinions begin to make judgments and assumptions about the situation. And those only led to pain. And I was attaching all these opinions and all this significance to this event, saying that this means this. We got taken away, therefore I am unloved, I'm unwanted, I'm not worthy. And all of these different opinions and ideas that come up. Now, recognizing that this takes place and saying, you know what, I know the game. I'm not playing the game. And you're not taking me down that rabbit hole. This is where keeping our mind in check begins to manifest in real reality. And these judgments and these assumptions, they happen every single day. And most of our mood swings and the times that our disposition changes are based upon the significance to the events that are taking place inside of our life that are not that significant, and the judgments that we make about them are not based on reality. So we can determine our disposition. We can determine what kind of mood that we're in based upon our perspective towards a circumstance that is coming our way. So, mind is feelings, perceptions, thoughts, desires, and reasons. Now, these all formulate a mindset. Now, a mindset is the program and the way that our mind has been set. That's why they call it mindset. Your mind is set, and that means it has undergone a pre-programming situation. For example, if you've thought about protecting your home and you have firearms and you know where they're located and you know where the ammunition is located and you've gone through the different scenarios inside of your mind about what would take place when an intruder enters your home, and you have your mind set. This is a pre-programmed thing that you don't have to rely on fear or triggers or any of these other things that you have developed a pattern of action. Well, this has taken place throughout our lives. And we have adopted certain mindsets at a very young age that are highly detrimental to us. And before we even understand it, that we are actually programming, we have allowed these significant events that have caused a lot of emotion, and that's how they get shared on our subconscious. As that the events and circumstances take place that were highly significant, that brought out of us a lot of emotion, and therefore they were embedded in the code. And that's what the analogy that I want to give here, that a code in programming in the computer language is based upon formulating, creating, and input. And the reality is that we've had a lot of input. We've had a lot of creating. Now this takes place by other people when we're young. This takes place by our own self when we are young, based upon our little small animal brain that is interpreting everything as me as the sinner, right? Everything's about me. My parents are fighting. What did I do? My parents are getting divorced. What did I do? You know, and it's this whole mindset of immaturity that programs a lot of these negative things that are stuck inside of our input. So a program is a sequence of code or sequence of input inserted into a mechanism. Now I want you to understand that you are the mechanism. You are the computer, if you will, and there has been multiple inputs that are not good code. They are not good information, and we can tell because they're manifesting inside of our behaviors, inside of our actions, and they're not working very well for us. And so it would behoove us to understand that part of this mindset is releasing some of those things that we thought were true. Releasing some of those things that have led us to our own paradigm and belief systems that are causing us a lot of pain. Now, this is what I firmly believe. Now, inside of any negative area of your life, there is a belief that is causing you to reach a barrier inside of your life. And there's a negative belief system, which is a negative input that needs to be deleted, that needs to override. And this is what I'm talking about here, is that as we discover these things that are causing us to reach our ceiling, that we say, you know what, I recognize this. This belief is not getting me to where I want to go, and I recognize it, and now I'm going to begin to override this. I'm going to replace this with the truth, because the truth is freeing. The truth is liberating. The truth brings growth and expansion. The truth does all of these things. But the limited belief keeps us stuck inside of that ceiling and not being able to go forward. So how does this play out? If you're not able to go forward inside of relationships, that you're experiencing a lot of loneliness and you're unable to step out and begin to grow inside of that area of your life, you have limited beliefs. You have beliefs that are keeping you stuck inside of that situation. And so it's important to understand the way the mind works. So we're all seeking transformation, right? Romans chapter 12 there, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And man, this brings to us an awesome reality of what transformation is and how transformation takes place. Now, apart from loving the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength, and your neighbor as yourself, and really getting rooted in love. Beyond that, I think the next best thing is for us to begin to understand that we are called into a process of transformation, and then to also begin to understand how that transformation plays out. So we are all longing for change. Right? We are all longing for transformation. But what exactly is transformation? That's what I'm going to talk about here for a second, so we can thoroughly grasp what it looks like. Because in our mind, once again, we have limited beliefs and we have different concepts of what transformation looks like and how it takes place and all of these different things. So transformation. First, understand this. That is, it comes from the concept and the idea of metamorphosis, and that we are undergoing a process of change, and that we are becoming something different. Now, inside of this conversation, it's important to understand that this is not ippity boppity boo, alakazula michikabula, okay? It's not none of that. And that's the false belief that we have. That I'm going to experience an event. Whether it's a seminar, whether it's a revival, whether it's, I don't know, some sort of supernatural event that is going to lead to a major instant transformation inside of my life. Okay? And that's exactly what we're looking for. And it's to no wonder that it fails to meet our expectations. And it doesn't happen. And we're looking for the anointed pastor, or we're looking for the prophet fairy, or we're looking for Nostradamus. I don't know, like so many different things that we can look to that is going to somehow radically give me the transformation. Maybe it's reading Tony Robbins books. Maybe it's, I don't know, some fancy seminar. Maybe it's another church service. Who knows? But the fact is that this metamorphosis that we're seeking, the change in the transformation that is radical, is not something that happens like magic. And that it doesn't come instantly in a moment. Now, engaging in the process and starting out on this path can come instantly. And that's where these events take place. That's where a church service takes place. That's where a book creates a radical mind shift. And it begins you on the process of metamorphosis. And you begin to go down that path. But even as you go down that path, it's all a journey. And here's the reality of this metamorphosis process, that there are stages to it. Here's the reality. The butterfly doesn't go from egg to butterfly, right? It doesn't get germinated and then start flying. And that's the way process of change works inside of our life. It works almost in the same manner that this egg goes to a larva, a caterpillar, and this caterpillar goes into the cocoon, and the cocoon it's in there and it's going through metamorphosis and it's changing, and it comes out a butterfly, and it becomes in a mature adult, and it becomes to the height of its creation, and it becomes everything that it was destined to be. Now here's the reality. It doesn't just snap our fingers and we become everything that we're destined to be. Things don't just magically fall in place in an instant and all of a sudden we become what we are destined to be. Okay? It's a process. So let's talk about first with the egg. So this egg, this is where you're born. This is where the germination takes place, the seed planting event, right? We know 9 months later, a birth happens. And so with the butterfly, the egg starts, and it is fertilized, and it's born. And life, new life is created. Now, I thoroughly believe that this happens spiritually. And that we have to become alive spiritually. And that we become woke, if you will. The real woke, not the false woke. And revelation and inspiration becomes open to us, and we basically become alive to God, and this communication and this connection takes place. And this is what it means to be born. And the same way that we are born in the natural, in that we come into this earth and the seed is planted and we are born physically, is the same way that happens in the spiritual, and that is a spiritual seed is planted. And all of a sudden it begins to get germination. And you begin to think about these things. And the seed that planted creates something, and it creates life inside of you. And now all of a sudden this journey and this process begins. But once again, it's just the first part of the stage. Number two is the larva. This is where it becomes the caterpillar, right? And it's crawling around. In my personal opinion, it's very ugly, right? It's very ugly. It's very messy. You know, the most important time, or the most important thing during this time is to eat. And this is what the caterpillar does. It eats and it eats and it eats and it feeds itself and it feeds itself and it feeds itself because it's about to undergo the process, right? And so this, what I feel like takes place that after we become spiritually alive and we're born and we set out on this journey, the most important thing that we can begin to do is begin to consume. And that is consume inspiration, consume revelation, consume the word. Ask God to speak to you. Go through the book of Proverbs. Read a chapter every day. After the month's over, start over again. And just begin to just feed yourself in an abundance fashion. Get into the word. And that's what I find to be very important, that as we're crawling around during this stage, this is a stage of infancy. This is a stage of falling down, getting up, falling down, getting up, falling down. And we go through this process repeatedly as we grow and develop, right? And there's no use criticizing people who are in that stage. You can criticize all you want, begin to judge and point fingers, or become the moral police and say, oh my gosh, look at them. Not understanding that they're in an infant state and they're in the get up, fall down stage. Now, they're going to get it soon. And that is, they're going to begin to walk this thing out. And so during this process, it's messy. But there's a lot of potential, right? Inside of this caterpillar, there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of destiny. There's a lot of greatness that is coming. But this is stage 2 of the process, to begin to feed yourself in an overwhelming fashion and to begin to go through the messiness and the ups and downs and learning to walk. It's all part of the process. Number 3 is the cocoon. This is the chrysalis. This is where we depart from. We get into seclusion, right? We get alone. We experience the dark night of the soul. For Jesus, it was going through the wilderness. For the children of Israel, it was going through the wilderness, and that is these moments where seclusion begins to happen. And it's much like hibernating. I read on some of these butterflies that they'll stay in that state and condition until conditions are right. And that is, if it's very cold, they could stay up, in there from 9 months to a year. Now, if all conditions are right, they can go in there and they can come out in a very quick fashion. But inside of this is a seclusion, but it is a reformation. And that is really throwing down everything that you thought you were. And that you thought you were a caterpillar, and this is the way you move, and this is the way you did things, and all of these different things. But when you go under the process of metamorphosis, you realize that you are a new creation. And that all things have become new, and that you have a new heart and a new mind and new belief systems to adopt, and new behaviors to embrace, and all of these different things. And so it begins to happen as we begin to this a form of hibernation, if you will, but it's a metamorphosis transformation. And what begins to happen is the butterfly begins to break free of that cocoon, right? And they're inside there and they're struggling, and it is the very struggle that causes the chemicals to come to their wings, okay? And it is the struggle of pushing against the cocoon, if you will, and breaking out of this that gives them the strength to fly, okay? And the reality is that if they don't go through this struggle, if they don't go through this metamorphosis change, flying is not going to happen for them. In fact, if you come in there in your nice codependent fashion and you take a little blade and you free them because you don't want them to struggle, and you stop them from experiencing the difficulty, in fact, the butterfly will not fly and it will die. And so this is the way God operates. He sees a struggle. He sees the pain that we're going through. He sees the discomfort, the agitation, the frustration, and we're wiggling, man. We're just pushing against it, right? And God sees. And we think that he's this mushy, codependent lover, that he's going to come down and alleviate our pain and cause it to be somehow easy for us, and not understanding that that's just not the way he operates. He loves us too much for that. And that is the very struggle, the very resistance of going through these different painful situations is what actually equips us with the resources to be successful. And that is a powerful, powerful reality. So going through the difficulty, coming out of that situation, undergoing metamorphosis, and becoming mature. Once they break free, they can't immediately fly. It takes a couple hours that I've researched. And during that time, they're just really pushing and flexing and just doing what is necessary to get the chemicals and to get everything flowing so they can fly. And we look at our lives, man, and we're in these different stages, and might be in a stage of immaturity, and we're like, man, I wish I could fly. And we see other men around us, and they're flying, man. They're family, faith, fitness, and finance, and they're rocking it, and they're connected to God. And it's almost like every day they hear God speak to them in some way or fashion. And we look at them and say, man, they're flying. And we look at here, and we're just like earthbound, like freaking fleshly men, just, living on the earth, going through these difficulties, and we can get discouraged. And we don't understand that we are going through a process of change, and this change is a process, and it's not something that happens instantly. So change, that has the idea of giving you a different position. We were once in a position of shame, guilt. We were once in a position that the Bible calls enemies of God. And for me personally, I was in a position of pauperhood, and that is that I was living in scarcity. I had a very victim mindset, and I was really stuck in pauperhood, and that was my position. And that was my course of action. And that's how it manifested inside of my behavior. But something began to change as I began to undergo the process of metamorphosis. And that is that I begin to get a different position. And that is the mindset of an overcomer, that I am now a victor and not a victim. Okay? And I can triumph victoriously over the difficulties that come to my life. And this set me on a new course and an action that I'm walking out today. So transformation. To transform something means to, of course, to change their position and their mindset and their belief system, but to change the character and the condition of something. And I'm so glad that that's what this process includes, because my character was severely lacking. Okay. In fact, most of the negative things I was experiencing in my life was due to choices that I was making and the deficits inside of my character and my integrity, and I was experiencing a lot of pain of that lack of character. Maybe you've been there, maybe you've felt that. And so transformation is changing of the character and the condition. I think it's very important to really understand that it's both of those. That it's character and condition. Because what we do is that we say, God, I just want you to change my circumstances. I just want you to change the conditions of my marriage. I just want you to change the conditions of my body. I just want you to change the conditions of my mindset. I just want you to change the conditions of my spirituality. And we pray and we seek and we long for conditions and circumstances to change. Not understanding that it is character first. That God is getting us through a process of character transformation, and He's bringing us into alignment with Himself. And that He is causing integrity between us, and that this is where unity comes from, and this is where power flows through connected to the source. And that's the place that He wants to bring us. And this will change and transform our character and bring us to a place of alignment and integrity that will manifest in our behavior and begin to change the conditions. There's nothing that would change the conditions of a marriage relationship better than character. There's nothing going to change a mindset, a mental health, a physical body more than the transformation of character. In fact, if we begin to develop love, which manifests in self-control, which springs from our character, a lot of the pain that we're feeling inside of these areas of our life will fix itself. You see what I'm talking about? So Romans 12:1. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that perfect and acceptable will of God. So renewing. This brings back the root word and the definition of renovation. And I love that terminology because I've worked in construction for a decade. And we did customer services, and I built a lot of homes. I did damage restoration and all of these different things. So I understand what it means to renovate, especially if you have experienced something inside of your home that has caused it to be deformed in some way. And that is like major roof leaks, foundation cracks. I've done those. I've done, all kinds of different stuff. And the goal of this restoration or this renovation is to bring back the building to its intended state. But the reality of what would happen is because of old materials like old flooring and different stuff, that it just doesn't come back to its original state. It gets upgraded to a greater state, right? And most oftentimes, practically all the time, what would happen would that the situation would lead to a major upgrade and to an uplift of the home. And that is, it wouldn't experience just restoration, it would experience a total renovation. And that is that you can't find the same tile anymore, you can't find the same granite shade and dialog and all these different things. And so it led to this really massive renovation. And so that's what this transformation is talking about here. It's giving us the mindset that we are being renovated and that we have experienced a major loss, right? The flood of sin has damaged the house. The earthquake of iniquity has begun to shake us, right? And we become damaged or flawed in some way or some fashion, and that we have difficulties and issues to walk through and things that need to be fixed. And what begins to happen is this transformation begins to take place. And says, God says, you know what, I'm going to do a renovation. Not only am I going to do a restoration where I bring you back to your intended state, but I'm going to cause a renovation that you're going to become way better than you ever were before. And that is, you're going to experience a state of a better state than you have ever had. And that happens first inside of our character. Our character is going to get better than it ever was before. Our integrity is going to grow and expand. It's going to get better than it ever was before. And our alignment and our connection with God is going to be established, and there's going to be a thorough connection, and it's going to be better than it ever was before. You see what I'm talking about here? So renovation, restore to a better, and that is to revive. Man, that is an awesome reality. Before we get into the next topic here, I just want to wrap this up and close with this thought. That look at your life, your family, faith, fitness, and your finances, and ask yourself, am I experiencing renovation? And that is, am I allowing God access to my home? This is the temple. To begin to do the necessary changes to produce this radical renovation that I am longing for. Now, to be able to do that, some jackhammering needs to take place sometimes. And this is called the stripping process. It is as we get stripped. It's uncomfortable. Things get torn down so they can be rebuilt better. And we think, the devastation that are happening inside of our relationships and the tearing down of our religious belief so it can be reformed in a more spiritual, connected fashion is painful, right? It defies stability. It defies tradition. But here we are in this process anyways. And so I want you to begin to look at your life and say, you know what? I'm going to be open to this renovation and to this renewing of my mind. And that is, I'm going to begin to look at the areas where I'm suffering lack, and begin to look at that and say, what negative beliefs am I holding on to that's manifesting inside of this reality that's taking place inside of my life. All right, brothers, I'm looking forward to week 2. I'll see you soon. Bye.